extremophiles are amazing. They somehow can live in environments that are detrimental to life and thrive and produce really cool compounds that are incredibly stable, that can be leveraged for so many different applications. And I love knowing that chance of finding something brand new to science that no one else has ever discovered.
Hey, Rum, what's going on?
Hey, Karl, how's it going?
Things are going well. It's a little bit of mid-August crazy, both at Messaging Lab and at Grow Everything. But welcome everyone to the Grow Everything podcast, where we talk about biology as technology. Erum, we were at a longevity and aging event last week. How did you think it went? You were one of the moderators of the event. I thought it was really a great event.
Yeah, it was a great event. So it was Aging by Biotech NYC, and it was a collaboration between Selene Therapeutics, Mindvine. So Selene's headed by Nina, Mindvine by Daniel. Biolabs came in and collaborated with them. We had it there. And then there were some other amazing sponsors. CDD is one of them. They provide a lot of consulting services. And it was interesting because I remember Nina came up to me just a month before and she's like, oh, I was thinking about doing this thing, you being a moderator for it. I'm like, okay, well, sign me up whenever you are ready to do it. And then it came together very quickly. And by the way, this was an after work event. So it started at 5:30 and into the evening. So it wasn't just one panel. It was 4 panels and very thoughtful panels starting from the early stage companies. And that was moderated and headlined by some early stage startups, including Nina's company. And then it was the panel that I moderated, which was on aging biomarkers. And wow, panelists were really cool. We had Keith Comito of Lifespan.io, also the Lifespan Research Institute, and we were talking about people we knew, and he's worked with a lot of the same people, which we have an episode coming up with a gentleman by the name of Benji who runs Pump.Science, and that's going to be an exciting episode, but Keith knew him very well. Another panelist was Reason. His name is Reason, that's it, no last name, and incredible person, has been documenting longevity biotech since early 2000s, so has a depth of knowledge. And Karl, you were there and you probably heard his like, oh my gosh, I've been doing this for such a long time. Can we just figure out these epigenetic clocks? All we have to do is X, Y, Z, and then we'd figure this all out. And then there was a PhD. Of course, you have to have a PhD scientist when you're talking about aging research. So that was Matt Usazada of Columbia University and also Chief Science Officer of Itasca Therapeutics, all looking at cellular senescence, which we've been deep diving into at Messaging Lab. And it was great. We had great perspectives, a lot of wonderful insights. And then there were 2 other panels that were around investment, which is always a hot topic and a question mark all the time. And then there was another one focused on pharma. So we had some people from pharma, Lilly, GSK, they rolled up and talked about longevity biotech, which was super interesting as well. What did you think? You were there. You were in the audience.
So I have a lot of thoughts, but just to set the stage for people, there was a waiting list of 150 people to go to this event. It was on a Wednesday night after work. So the fact that there were that many people wanting to get into this event and turned away just shows the amount of interest that there is in this topic and in this space. The space was packed. There was a lot of people. I thought the panels were good. Your panel was the best because you're the best moderator.
Stop.
I had a bunch of people say to me, Erum is such a good moderator. How does she do it? So I was going to ask you, can you offer 2 tips for being a great moderator? How did you prepare? You and I have had episodes on networking. We haven't really talked about moderating, though we do moderate a fair number of panels. It's been a while since I've moderated one, but you did such a good job. So what did you do to prepare?
Yeah, well, learn from the best. Of course, I've seen you moderate a bunch of panels. You did one at the Argentinian consulate. That was really interesting. But I really looked at the whole event. So what is this? What's going on? There's going to be people that are interested in this topic. So aging biotech, there's going to be 4 panels. It's a lot. It's after work too. So my approach was, okay, I have to keep it light and you have to keep it engaging. And even for the panelists, they also had a long day at work. My panel were thought leaders in the industry and they're professionals. So they had their talking points, which was clear they had them. But I got together with them beforehand. I think it's really important when you have a panel is to just get on a quick call with the panelists, send them questions in advance before you even get on the call with them to prepare, just so they know and they can give you feedback. I think because of this podcast, we're professionals in asking right questions that we can get in the head of our guest a little bit and set them up to talk about what they're interested in a way that's not like, what inspired you to start this? Although those questions are important, and we do ask those questions here on the podcast to some of our guests, we didn't have an hour. So we only had 30 minutes to have this conversation. So I'm like, what question can I ask that will set the audience up to think about the answer? Because anytime a question's asked, people automatically want to answer it. And because our audience also were full of professionals that are in or circumvent the space of aging and longevity, they would also try to come up with answers, which is great because then they could ask questions, which we did not have time for in the open forum. And then she would try to throw some jokes in there, making it relevant to what's going on in the news too. You can't talk about longevity these days without mentioning Brian Johnson in some regard. So that was a big thing. Use some cultural terms. So when we talk about cellular senescence, everyone's talking about zombie cells as a perspective, which our panelist, Matt, he shut that down. He's like, I hate the term zombie cells because it's really not accurate, because zombies makes it seem like there is a pathogen that comes in and disrupts. And then you have this horrible disease that comes in where senescent cells are kind of always there. He was saying that they're there, they're homeostatic, they're living in harmony with your active cells, but only when there's a lot of stress do those senescent cells have permission to proliferate, I guess you can say. So anyway, those are my tips. I know I gave a lot of tips, but that was my approach to this panel. I think it changes depending on who's on the panel. It was my probably 6th panel of the year so far.
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, so I'm going to summarize what you just said. So for our listeners, basically you said, do your research, share the questions in advance, and get on the phone with your panelists, and then also keep it light. And also consider the context. So that's a lot more than 2 tips, but yeah. I agree with all of those. I thought that was really good. So one thing, the entire event went by really quickly. I was surprised that each of the panels lasted as short as they did, which says a lot about the topic. I thought it was really going to be drawn out. It wasn't. And there was a nice long networking after the event. The one thing that we didn't really get to talk about during this event was space and its space impact on longevity. And we talk about space a fair amount here on Grow Everything, something I never thought we would. But I think there's a lot of lessons from space. And Erum, if you saw Erum right now, you'd see she's wearing her NASA t-shirt or pullover. But do you think the organizers didn't think about space, or was it they didn't have anybody that they could pull from? Our podcast guest today would be the perfect person for that.
Yeah, I don't think they thought about it. I was happy that they had pharma in the room. That baby steps, right, Karl? There's so much convergence happening. So I think because it was a end of the day type of event and they wanted to just talk about aging biomarkers and companies and activity that's happening in the market today, they didn't really talk about innovation as much, which we'll be talking about today. And space is a great place. I get so excited when we talk about space just because we had Dr. Kate Rubins on, Chris Mason on, we had Erica de Benedictis on. These are all amazing people that look at space travel, space research. Right now, the focus is on Mars, but to be able to come up with experiments to test how can life exist or navigate in space conditions is just very interesting problem to solve. So I recommend people listening to those episodes to get some precursors into space biotech discussions and my excitement. And Karl's excitement too. Karl's like, okay, I know that it's out there. I think in the beginning you were like, what is this? But you definitely came around to looking at the commercial side of things. It's fun to talk about space in general, but how is it practical to talk about today?
Yeah, what I've come to learn about space and growing everything is that it requires this convergence of ideas and technologies. And it's not just these extreme conditions, which we talk about extremophiles, these microbes that live under very challenging conditions all over the planet, but it's even more so. And then how does human biology get impacted by extreme radiation in this very extreme environment? And then how do you create technologies that are going to survive? How do you miniaturize things? All of those things go into space research. So I think what I've really come to appreciate is the convergence aspect of this. And I think that's a perfect segue to our guest today, because he's an example of someone who is a convergent thinker, if I can say that. He embodies superconvergence in terms of he got his PhD, he's worked on antimicrobial delivery systems, he's worked in food science, he's worked with extremophiles, and then all of that led him to be recruited by Harvard researcher David Sinclair, who's a longevity researcher, and ended up starting this company, Delavie Sciences. And his name is Kyle Landry. We're super excited to have him on the podcast today. Erum, how did we meet Kyle?
Oh, yeah. Well, I met Kyle at Suppliers Day, which is a beauty cosmetics conference. And you'll see why when Kyle talks about his company, Delavie. And I was with Ray Cutlin, and we were walking around the expo hall and came across Kyle and his colleagues at their booth. There was this big sign that said NASA, and there was rocket ships and space on there. And I'm like, what is going on here? And Ray had met Kyle before. She's like, oh, hello, this is Erum, and made the introduction. I was just blown away hearing their story from the perspective of someone walking through an expo hall and them talking about their company, which was really cool to hear it that way from in that situation, pretty much describing how their ingredient can be used in other products. And then I was like, oh my gosh, this is such a great story. We have to have you on the pod. And he was like, absolutely.
Yeah, and I ended up meeting him after you had walked away. I didn't even realize you had talked to him. I had the same exact reaction. I saw the poster that said NASA extremophiles. I started asking questions, and of course my head is going, we need to get you on the podcast. And he's like, oh, I just talked to Erum and Ray.
Yeah.
So then that started the entire conversation, and that's how we ended up having Kyle on the podcast. So I think with that, let's let Kyle take it away. All right, Dr. Kyle Landry, we are so happy to have you on the Grow Everything podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Let's do a little bit of background for our audience that doesn't know you. You've taken this really interesting journey from extremophile research to skin longevity, which is a really head-turning, unexpected journey. What first inspired you to go into the world of aging biology, and when did you realize microbes might hold the key?
So I'll start off by saying I never thought I'd be here. I actually started off as a food scientist. So I went from food to longevity to biowarfare to diabetes drugs to skincare.
Okay.
Is my exact journey. My extremophile journey started when I was doing my master's in food science, and I was actually looking for enzymes to make flavor nucleotides, which are certain pieces of genetic information that trigger umami taste in food. It's a big industry in food. A lot of people don't realize that's in there. So I was using extremophiles to make potential novel food ingredients because their enzymes work differently than some other ones. Longevity came in when I was finishing my PhD, and someone by the name of David Sinclair gave me a phone call from Harvard Medical School and said, hey, Kyle, I read some of your papers. You're the only person I see kind of doing this research. Do you want to come work in my lab for a little bit? So I went from having no longevity to all of a sudden working with a longevity expert. And that was my jump into the longevity space. But what's amazing is that extremophiles dovetail nicely in longevity because somehow they've been able to survive and thrive in conditions that are normally detrimental to life. And you may think, how does that link to longevity? Well, aging and diseases are just an accumulation of abuse over life. And if extremophiles can do this at a hyperscale or hypersize, how can we leverage that and figure out how to work on our biology? And that was my direct connection into longevity. Skincare came about 10 plus years later, but I eventually made it there. But I never thought I'd be in skincare at all.
Amazing.
Wow. Yeah, there's just so much. Longevity, extremophiles, biotech, space, everything is converging. And I do pride ourselves in this podcast to be able to deconstruct some of this and then reconstruct it, just like you have done in your career path. It's just all very exciting. And I love David Sinclair. I'm just wrapping up his book, Lifespan. I'll put that in the show notes. It's a really good starter to really understand aging as a disease. So you're working with the brilliant minds on longevity and health, but you're also working with brilliant minds at space agencies.
That's right.
How did working with space agencies shape the idea of Delavie, your company? And how did astronaut health turn into skincare?
Yeah. So this is an interesting crossroad here. And I want to step back for a second because normally longevity research, it has an applied goal, but it's a long way to get there to make it applied. Now, the food industry is different. You have a short-term goal for something that's applied. So somehow I ended up in a space where we were developing technology that could be used in short to medium term that leveraged all of these things, which was amazing. So if we step back with NASA, what happened was I was working with David on these extremophiles for these processes, and we discovered some really cool technology that could potentially have been used to clean the water systems on the International Space Station. And like I said, I was in the biodefense space in the first place, which is how we got into NASA. But we started testing this technology to clean the Mars rover, to clean the International Space Station. And then we also had a small molecule at the same time that we actually won an award from NASA called the NASA iTech Award. And this award was based on a technology where you could take this compound and it would upregulate your body's defenses in DNA repair mechanisms so that an astronaut could withstand and mitigate the effects of radiation on long-duration space travel. So we were already in space for that application. We're at the physical application of cleaning, disinfecting, removing debris, bacteria from the space station. And then while we're there, they were like, hey, we have this organism that we're using to model sanitation, disinfection. We put it outside the space station. It survived for 18 months. And now it has amazing resistance to UVC radiation. Now, UVC, we don't really care about unless you want to disinfect your toothbrush or you're in a hospital and they disinfect the operating room with germicidal lamps. But the idea was, can we extend this protection into UVA and UVB radiation, which is what we care about here for sun protection? So we took this test tube idea, brought it into our lab, and about 1.5 years, 2 years of R&D, we were able to make something from this organism that could be added to sunscreens to enhance the sun protection value. And that's how Delavie started. Because we figured no one's going to buy an ingredient for sunscreen from a biological warfare company.
Right.
And so we were like, we have to rebrand, reposition a little bit. So in 2020, 2021, we created Delavie Sciences, and that was our first step into skincare. But we later discovered a lot of longevity things that we ported over into other technologies as well.
That's amazing. I'm looking forward to getting into those and diving deep into this extremophile for sunscreen. But can you paint a picture of what it's like to experience one of your products? What's happening on the surface, maybe on the molecular level, when someone uses it? You mentioned UVC protection. Have you guys been able to add that UVA, UVB protection into it?
Yeah. So the R&D, we were able to figure out how to do that. And so now our ingredient, Bacillus lysate, is being sold around the world for sunscreens where it enhances the UVA, UVB protection. You can get up to a 50-60% increase in SPF, sun protection value, from this addition. We've published this in peer-reviewed journals so you can see how it works. Now, what's really interesting is that the organism itself produced this milky compound that coated itself. That's what protected it from this radiation. And that is not present in terrestrial versions of this organism. So you can find this, it's a ubiquitous organism, but it doesn't have the properties that it developed from being in space, in being in the conditions as before. So this is something that has evolved over time, and we're able to leverage that for sun protection. Now, on the longevity side, we were thinking, hey, if this could survive and block radiation, it also must be able to repair itself. It must be able to protect itself. So David and I started tinkering with this. And this is where we discovered its activation of sirtuin genes, which if you're in the longevity space, you know what sirtuins are. DNA repair, housekeeping, efficiency stuff with mitochondria, all that stuff's in there. So it activates those. It also activates the pathways to increase your cell's ability to make hyaluronic acid. Now, hyaluronic acid is added to almost every cosmetic skincare product.
Yeah, these days.
But the problem is it may not absorb and penetrate in the skin. And even if it does, it's only there for a short period of time because it's not actually integrated into the matrix of your skin. The Bacillus lysate tells your body to make more. So you're having your own intrinsic hyaluronic acid, which is more efficacious and lasts longer. than topical hyaluronic acid. Outside of that, you have free radical protection. So UVA leads to the formation of wrinkles. So if you step back, UVB leads to cancer, double strand breaks, radiate. UVA is what accelerates fine lines and wrinkles. And that's because UVA enters your skin, makes a free radical, and it cross-links your collagen, elastin, breaks down all the components in your skin, which accelerates aging. So the bacillus lysate stops that from happening because it quenches or sequesters the free radicals that are formed from UVA. So you have a preventative wrinkle thing along with minimizing your current wrinkles because of the hyaluronic acid. There's so many things that it does that we discovered that we were like, you know what? It does a lot more than just sunscreen for enhancing. So let's dive down that avenue as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is something I also was thinking about in terms of collagen. When people just put collagen on their skin versus have your own body produce its own collagen is more effective.
Yeah, of course.
And I wonder how many other molecules that this process, you can make these types of molecules that are beneficial for yourself. But it's really interesting because you're saying that this bacillus lysate on Earth wasn't able to produce this. It was able to produce it in space only. When you brought it back down to Earth, how did it continue producing this? It sounds like it evolved in these extreme environments, but then how did it turn into something that's gentle and restorative for skin?
Yeah, so that's the $1 million question. How does anything evolve over time?
Mm-hmm.
But in space, in lower Earth orbit or LEO, genes are turned on that aren't necessarily turned on here on Earth because of three-dimensional physics, where the genes touch each other and stuff like that. But what we found is we were able to maintain that phenotype by growing it under certain conditions that allow those genes to continue to be expressed. So outside of just the organism, there is a proprietary way to grow it, manufacturing process, all stuff we had to scale up and understand to make this a reality. I mean, we're selling hundreds of kilos of this stuff at a time, so you can't make it in test tubes. So this is where now we went from a test tube to 5,000 to 15,000 liter reactors at a time.
Amazing.
Yeah, so outside of the R&D, we also had to have the scale-up process of the economy, industrial scale-up. And that's one part that as scientists and researchers, I'll tell you, I never thought of or appreciated. Usually, if you're a scientist or a graduate student, you're like, oh, I just care about this in the research area to get the paper out. But the feasibility of going from that to something that works at economies of scale is mind-blowing. And you have to prepare for that and think about that. But yeah, it's crazy.
Can I just ask one question, and I'll summarize it. Maybe I'm incorrect. You can correct me. That NASA said, hey, we've got this microbe that's been sitting outside of the space station. What did that look like? What do you mean it's sitting outside of the space station?
There's something called the Expo-Z. I actually have pictures of it I could send you.
Ooh.
Expo-Z is like a module that's attached to the Columbia Space Lab part. And it's basically like a box where you can put all little samples and you can put all different filters on it so you can expose it to like dark side of Mars, light side of Mars, dark side of Moon, light side of Moon, or open space, or all these different things. And it just sits out there. And then an astronaut goes out there, collects the samples, brings it in, freezes it, and sends it back down. So there's actually implementation partner modules that you can bolt on to do this type of research on the space station.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, right?
Yeah, very cool. I mean, you're starting to sound like two friends of the pod, Chris Mason and Dr. Kate Rubins. Have you met them?
Yeah, I've submitted grants with Chris Mason. We actually had a grant, I believe it was 2019, called Triomics in Space, where we were going to sequence the astronaut's genome in real time, send it down, look at the epigenetic drift and impacts of lower Earth orbit on the astronaut, sampling saliva, feces, a whole bunch of other stuff. I know Chris Mason. We've submitted some grants together, talked about doing some research. Yeah.
That's incredible. Small world when it comes to astronaut genetics and extremophiles in space.
I guess so.
Yeah, that's incredible. And again, you mentioned David Sinclair at the top of the episode, one of the leading voices in longevity. We had a great portion of hearing him speak as well. It sounds like he obviously is influential. Is he part of the company right now?
Yeah, he co-founded Delavie with myself, and he also co-founded the holding company that Delavie is part of.
Got it.
Yeah. So, do you see Delavie expanding beyond skincare, and what other industries might benefit from your discoveries? And I know that this question for entrepreneurs is like, no, we're focused on skincare because you have investors and you don't want to. But you talked about other applications, so would love to visioneer a little bit and hear from you.
So unfortunately, we have to stay laser focused because we're in a crowded space. We're trying to make headway. We want to do something really well. But the applications outside could be for paint, could be for plastics, could be for fabric, could be for glass. This is just for the Bacillus lysate, for UV, because UV affects a lot of things. I mean, plastics fade and yellow and crack, paints fade over time. Anything that could help protect this damage could be, this ingredient could be used for. Now, Delavie itself has over 1,000 novel extremophiles that we use to create and mine for new ingredients. We just launched a new ingredient 2 months ago that comes from a thermophilic fungus, brand new genus of fungi there. That's used in cosmetics for removing oil, unplugging pores, controlling like the skin microbiome. But in reality, that could be used to clean and remove biofilms, pet food bowls, or in the medical scenario situation, clean different surfaces. There's a lot of applications. In the other extremophiles we have, same thing. They can be applied for so many different things in the industrial and consumer space. But we're constantly developing new ingredients, at least for consumer space and health and wellness right now. But there are other opportunities we do have.
It's so fascinating to me. We love that extremophile space because we feel like there's so much to learn there. But if you've worked with 1,000 extremophiles, what have you learned from them about resilience, either biologically or even personally?
So I've worked with extremophiles since 2009. So I've been in the extremophile space for quite some time, and they're very difficult to work with. One, they're not model organisms. Two, they grow in ridiculous conditions that sometimes are hard to reproduce. Three, I'll give you an example. So the organism that we used to launch the ingredient a few months ago, it's called hydrolytic enzyme complex. When you do your traditional sequencing or proteomics or transcriptomics and you blast it in NCBI, everything would be 30% similar, which means it's related to nothing. And you have no information to do anything. So the common mindset of, just sequence it, produce it in E. coli goes out the window because you don't know what this is. You don't know what the function is. Even if you look at the active domains or where you try to figure out what it does, it's not there. And then there are things called PTMs, post-translational modifications, where after the protein is made, some other machinery comes on and like bolts on a carbohydrate or something. You don't have that input like you would with an organism that's well studied. It takes a lot longer to figure stuff out, and you have to use a lot of old school biochem stuff from the 60s and 70s and 80s on how to purify things the old school way. But what I've learned is extremophiles are amazing. They somehow can live in environments, like I've said before, that are detrimental to life or would end life and thrive and produce really cool compounds that are incredibly stable, that can be leveraged for so many different applications. And I love knowing, and I say knowing, that I have a great chance of finding something brand new to science that no one else has ever discovered. And that just excites me. That's why I've been in extremophiles for so long.
Yeah. You have this fundamental knowledge working with extremophiles for so long, and there's so many different avenues that you can go down, but you have this company, you're saying laser focus, very admirable. But do you work with a university or a research institute or maybe other entrepreneurs to be able to take your knowledge and share it with people that want to apply what you've done? I mean, scaling up in biotech has been very challenging for some people. You've figured out a pathway. How do you share this information with others that are trying to leverage biology?
Yeah, so I'm very active in the mentoring community. So, for example, I'm on the board of the College of Natural Science, the Dean's Board for UMass Amherst. I'm on the board of a few departments for some universities, and I try to help students and people graduating think outside of, I just have to do this to check the box to graduate. It's more of, how is this process teaching me or giving me tool sets to take it to the next level, to think about these large problems? And understanding that in real life, you're working towards an end goal. You're not just doing something to do it. I found a lot of people in academia, graduate students and stuff, they don't think like that. They don't think of how can I commercialize this or what can I make and go from there. They think of, oh, this is a cool science project. I want to learn more. But in industry, it's not a race to learn as much as possible. It's a race to figure out how to make it a product as fast as possible and develop version 2.0 after version 1.0 is out. So I talk to a lot of people, mentor a lot of people. I have some people who are in the industry reach out and ask for insight. How can I do this? What can I do this? Or they just like to hear the story that I tell sometimes in talks so they can be inspired and be like, wow, I don't have to stay in this box. Mm-hmm. That's another thing people think like, wow, I'm doing this. I have to stay in that box. That's my lane. I've never stayed in a box. And I may be the minority. Honestly, it doesn't always work out, but you don't have to think just because you did this, you have to stay in that for your whole life. See how the tools and skill sets you're learning can be applied to so many different areas. And then don't be afraid to step out of your box and see where it takes you.
Hi, a quick shout out to our sponsor, Messaging Lab, the force multiplier for biotech. Your biotech company is making the world a better place. You know that, we know that. But does the world? There's a big reason why some biotech companies attract investors, sign up customers, and get attention. That reason is strategic communications. At Messaging Lab, we translate complex science and economics into compelling narratives. And we have done that for the most successful biotech companies across healthcare, agriculture, personal care and beauty, materials, and the list goes on. We're here to make sure your ideas not only get heard, but resonate with your audience. So if it's time to amplify your company's voice, visit messaginglab.com to explore how we can elevate your story and grow your business.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice and good to hear you saying it that way. It's interesting because you guys sit at this intersection of biology, beauty, longevity, space science. It's like this convergence. You talked about how you need to go back to these old biochemistry techniques from the 80s, from the 60s, 50s, to be able to discover and understand how these extremophiles work. But do you see this work as being part of a larger shift in terms of how we define health and resilience?
Yeah, so I've always thought about it this way, and I don't want to sound corny like from Jurassic Park, but nature will find a way. There's so many times where we try to discover or work on something, but there's already an answer out there in nature, right? So I think the mindset of longevity and health is going back down to fundamentals as simple as diet, exercise, sleep, getting that worked out, and then going to the next level. And people now are more intentional with what they do. They want to know that the ingredients actually do stuff or work with stuff. They care about what they put on their body, what they put in their body. And having transparency with information, what it can do, is very important now. Now, where the ingredients come from is another matter. Like, people are staying away from synthetics and GMO, stuff like that, even though that's a whole other debate on what that is. But just knowing that you can find something that's naturally occurring or comes from something from nature that can then be applied directly really helps with the movement that people are moving towards now.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I asked the question about how do you share your information, your knowledge, because you had to build such fundamental tools or processes in order to harness these extremophiles and to produce the molecules. And you developed a product going straight for it. And there's always this conversation when it comes to entrepreneurship, the platform versus product. Lately, we've been singing the praises of going create a product and getting out there because it's just, you have this direct relationship with the people that are purchasing it. But in your case, I'm like, a platform would be interesting because to be able to tame these or domesticate these extremophiles, it seems to be like very valuable because you shared all of these different applications. And I don't know if you've ever given that thought or if you wanted to share something, because this is a question that a lot of entrepreneurs are grappling with, product versus platform.
So we have, I'll say on the platform side, Delavie side, where Delavie Sciences' main goal is to be a technology powerhouse where we leverage these organisms as platforms to create new ingredients. We then build products around those ingredients. This allows us a unique opportunity because we see the benefits of these ingredients that we have from our R&D pipeline of innovation. And then we could say, wow, this ingredient fills this gap in the consumer goods space or in the industry space. Let's build a product around that. It's actually very, I don't want to say nerve-wracking, but there's a lot of stuff going on basically running two types of companies, right? An R&D and development company, which is what we do here in Worcester I'm here in our lab. This is my office. We do all the R&D here, all the organisms, create new things. But then we have in our case, the beauty arm, where we have Aeonia line, which is all longevity skincare based on the space ingredient, Bacillus lysate. And then we have a new cosmetic line coming out September, October called Layer 1, which is based on that new ingredient I told you, hydrolytic enzyme complex. It's a face wash and toner. So we're doing both, and I'm very lucky to be able to do that. But if I were to just not have this opportunity, you would have to figure out if you have the platform, are you just fundraising on the platform to get to the idea? Or do you want to do a platform and launch one product to show you could do it? Mm-hmm. Because that's the other thing, right? A lot of people have ideas, but to actually do it, to go from A to Z to say, hey, here's this crazy idea. Now I made a product and launched it. That's a different story than just pitching for ideas.
Totally.
You have to figure out, can I make a product with the runway I have for financing to get it to show that I can do it and then raise more money, or go back and forth? And that is a big question. And it just depends on the product, the industry, and what you're looking for.
Wow.
Yeah. I was hoping, Kyle, you might talk about what it looks like on your corporate partner side, is the way I should say it. Because you guys are building these products, but you're already producing a lot of ingredients. Mm-hmm. Or a lot. Can you talk a little bit about like who's buying them? You don't have to mention names.
Yeah.
What kind of ingredients are they showing up in? Can we go out and buy those products today?
Yeah, you can. So the Bacillus lysate inky name, or the ingredient list, is Bacillus lysate, and it's available in various sunscreens that are sold domestically and internationally. It's also in some hair care products because UV radiation bleaches dyed hair. So this is an example of, we're in the longevity skincare space. Mm-hmm. We're not in the hair care space. So we can work with companies, sell them our ingredient to protect the hair from sun damage, which we never plan on going into. That's great. And it's in some boutiques, shampoos, and conditioners that are available in spas. We're working with a group out of the UK that's launching a whole line of lip care. Mm-hmm. And what they found was that because the Bacillus lysate activates hyaluronic acid, it's great at plumping lips. Now, we're not going to make lipstick or lip balm because we're in the longevity skincare space. So we work with them to formulate. They buy our ingredient, they put it in. They're launching later this year with a whole new set of lines. We've worked with numerous formulation houses, large brands, large, massive conglomerates, where they test our ingredient in various different products, or our ingredients in different products. And we're at various stages of products that have launched to just creation of ideas of products. So we're all over the place, and that's a whole beast in itself outside of the let's sell products on TikTok, Meta, Instagram, D2C platform, Amazon, which is what we also do, which is a whole other crazy thing. And I'm split down the middle. It's interesting times.
Oh my gosh, there's so much we want to talk to you about offline when it comes to business. I know Karl's gears are turning, as am I, just from the companies that we know and speak with. We could just see some nice partnerships happening on that side. And I think it's also because we met at Suppliers Day and you had a booth. So in my mind, I put you in the skincare bucket, but just the fact that you do have this platform and you can support the creation of other ingredients. And you're using these microbes to create these ingredients, but these microbes are just the factory. They're not actually going on your skin.
Nope, they just make it. So that's a lot of people ask, oh, is this a prebiotic or a probiotic? I'm like, no, it's not. It's not a probiotic where you're putting bacteria and stuff on there.
Yeah.
It's bacteria that produces these things that normally they produce it to protect themselves, but yet it has the benefits of protecting us. And we use them as a little factory to make it, just like they make insulin and all these other compounds through production like that. And then we go from there.
Yeah.
Amazing.
We've talked about the skin microbiome often on this podcast. On one side, there's been a lot of microbes that have been missing from our skin because we overclean, we live in these sterile environments. Has that come up in your research in terms of needing more microbes on our skin? And especially in the context of astronauts, they live probably, at first I would say in a very sterile environment when we're talking about the space station, but I heard that it's pretty much a toilet up there. Yeah. So there's microbes all around. Yeah. But microbes on the skin, go.
Yeah, so the skin microbiome is something I think people don't put a lot of thought into until it's too late. Mm-hmm. So we've thought about this since the creation. Actually, all of our ingredients and products have been tested for the impact on their skin microbiome. So the Bacillus lysate and the hydrolytic enzyme complex have been certified by this German agency called My Microbiome, where they look at its impact on skin microbiome and controlling the levels of the bacteria. So we want to make sure we don't disrupt the microbiome, because if you do on the face, you get pimples, boils, right? You get all these problems, dysbiosis that lead to negative effects. And the last thing I want, and I believe in, is to use more products.
Yeah.
I'm anti 30 SKUs of skincare. I'm 2 or 3, and that's it. So we want to make sure that what we're creating isn't harming any of that. There's a lot of evidence, whether it's for the gut-brain axis, the skin, all these different things, where diversity and microbiome balancing and not having dysbiosis is beneficial. And unfortunately, using products, or a lot of products, can actually harm that and promote dysbiosis. I mean, how many people have used products and then all of a sudden break out? Yeah, it's plugged pores, all these other things, and that can lead to disbalance. So it's very important for us. So we make sure that our products and our ingredients do that. And that's actually an area of our research too. We're looking at ways to leverage these either postbiotic or prebiotics that these organisms can produce that actually enhance the already existing microbiome on the skin. That's a very interesting area and something that we're thinking about making products around, because we're in this unique position where we can leverage these things that no one else has.
Yeah, I wonder what a world would be like if the Bacillus lysate lived on your skin. And then it's like, oops, you're not selling products anymore. You're selling Bacillus lysate. Or it just ends up living on your skin. And it's like, all right, I'm out of the company.
I mean, luckily, Bacillus lysate means a lysed version of Bacillus. It's not the live thing. So there's nothing in there living. But this is a great example. If you travel a lot, your gut microbiome changes all the time based on what you eat. And it's the same thing. If you go swimming in a pond, or you change your soap, or you do this, you do that, you are changed, or you go move in with someone, or you get a dog. All this stuff impacts all the time. Yeah. But it's just good to have an understanding to make sure you're not destroying it.
Yeah.
With your skin.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Totally. I'm curious, Kyle, do you have a point of view in terms of, like, you guys are doing a lot of things in longevity and in skincare. What does skincare or longevity look like in the next 5 or 10 years?
I think it's going to be less masking and hiding. So a lot of products now temporarily plump or hide or fill with silicone, right? They don't really address the issue. Mm-hmm. And the concept of longevity in skincare is relatively new. I mean, you just saw L'Oreal's CEO came out saying, hey, we're focusing on this. Estee Lauder's focusing on that, because they've realized that skincare up until this point has just been hiding or masking or temporarily fixing. A great example is the info commercial where they put that stuff under the guy's eye, it disappears in 10 seconds. But then 3 hours later, his eyes come back because it's temporarily fixing it. So I think addressing the issues, trying to repair them, and mitigating future damage is basically going to be the direction. And it's going to be very tailored specific. Everyone's microbiome is different. Everyone's skin is different in terms of oil versus dry, the tone. But there will be some basic underlying things that matter, like preventing from sun damage or preventing from environmental pollution to minimize accelerated aging, but then also addressing and repairing what's already been done. Now, honestly, you can't go back to what your skin was 20 years ago. It's impossible. Mm-hmm. But you can make it the best it can be at its current stage and then prevent future damage. And that's what we're trying to do at Delavie with our products. We're not saying your skin's going to go back 20 years and you're going to be like a baby, but we're saying we'll make what you have right now the best it can be and then sustain that for the future and prevent against future damage instead of claiming we'll bring you back 30 years, which is impossible.
Yeah, that's the premium line that Kyle's been using, because if you guys see him on the screen, he's actually 80 years old. So he has this premium line he's working on that he makes him look like, I don't know, he's 20, 30 years old. I'm just kidding.
No.
But
I still have hair, which is surprising because I have 3 young daughters.
yeah.
So I'm surprised that you have my hair.
Wow. Yeah. Karl, too. He has 3 young, not young anymore, boys. So
Yeah, 3 young men.
young men. Yeah. You guys have 3. Oh, wow. Can't imagine. All right. So we're at the time where we do the quick fire question. So are you ready, Kyle?
I am ready.
You're ready. Okay. I'll ask, then Karl asks. Okay. So here we go. Desert, deep sea, or space. Where would you hunt for your next microbe?
Well, I've been to all of them already. I would go back to deep sea. Yep, deep sea, I'd go back there. Or the Arctic is where I'd actually.
Oh, snap.
Interesting.
Awesome.
Yeah,
But I've been to them already, unfortunately.
amazing. So what's a biofact that most people don't believe, but they should believe it?
A biofact? Let me see. That's a tough one. So biofact for longevity, everyone already has the tools and the know-how to extend your longevity, and that is getting a great night's sleep, a lot of hydration, and controlling what you eat. You don't need a miracle pill. You don't need red light. You don't need cold plunges to do it. If you just work on those 3 foundations and then work on your mental health, you've already biohacked your way more than 99% of the population.
Yeah.
If you can get those, you don't need something else to do it.
Yeah. You only need the Delavie Sciences skincare line to make sure your skin is young.
Well, that skincare is a little different
Yeah.
because that's protection and prevention from external elements. But in terms of feeling great, having great mental clarity,
Yeah.
really making your body optimal for function. I mean, you always know it. If you get a great night rest, or you don't eat a lot of crappy food, or you don't drink a lot of alcohol, or you exercise, you feel great.
Yeah.
So why not do that every day?
Yeah. Love it. Love it. So what's your personal skincare non-negotiable?
Actually, it's the Delavie Science Serum. That's the non-negotiable.
Wow.
So I'll tell you a thing. I've never used skincare in my life until I started here. I saw the clinical data and I was blown away. So I started using it. And honestly, I've never gone back. I use other face washes and stuff. I'll use Cetaphil, for example, which is a great face wash, very simple. But our new face wash coming out is better than that, in my opinion. But we'll see what happens, what the people think. But I would say our serum and then sunscreen, of course. Sunscreen, people get a lot of misinformation about. The biggest thing I'll say about sunscreen is pay attention to the directions for use. And I'll give you a great example. My daughters, we buy like the giant spray cans that you spray on. And if you read it, it says there are 4 applications per can. How many times do you actually use that can? Weeks and weeks and weeks.
Yeah.
So this misinformation where sunscreen may not be working or people question its use could be because they're just not following directions. So you have to follow the directions, see how much you're putting on, follow the reapplication, because all of those things dictate its SPF value. You can't assume that if you put it on once at 8 a.m., you're good all day.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's what the population does.
Yeah, that's what most people do. It's true.
Yeah, so you got to follow the directions for skincare and sun care because all the claims, the data, the protection are all based on those directions that are on the bottom.
So continuing with the quick fire, would you rather discover a microbe that halts aging or reverses aging?
Halts aging. 100% halts aging because reversing aging, I just don't know if what that would do. I think halting it in your prime, now it would be ideal. Now socially, who knows what that will do? Social economics and population and all of that. But all that aside, I think halting aging would be very interesting in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Final question. The weirdest place you've collected a sample from?
The weirdest place was my grandmother's air conditioner. So I took apart her air conditioner, and in the back, there was this really dark, black, disgusting slime. So I took samples from there. I think we got 15 organisms from there.
Unreal.
Another thing, I'll tell you two other ones. A can of petroleum jelly from the 1950s. So I found this in a supply closet where I was, and they were going to throw it out where I was at school. They were like, oh, that's old. We don't want it. I took it, and we isolated 2 organisms from that, from in the middle of the petroleum jelly from the night. I still have the can in the lab, actually, because it looks pretty cool. And then the third one was underground, when I went 5,000 feet underground in a gold mine. That was a phenomenal place to.
Wow.
Amazing.
What did you find? Do these microbes do anything crazy? Are they named after you because they didn't exist before?
There's a lot of cool things. The one from the mine we're looking at as an ingredient because it helps protect from heavy oxidation from iron and a few other things that are pro-aging pro-oxidants. We have a bunch of unknown named organisms. That's actually something we have to deal with, and that's writing papers, showing what they are, claiming names. So the organism that makes our ingredient for the face wash, we actually named that. It's called Parvibulbium thermostericus. It's a brand new genus of fungi. And we had to go through the whole process of naming it, submitting it to a collection, publishing it in CPI, this whole other thing. And that's a whole R&D project in itself. There's a lot of cool things going on here, but unfortunately not enough time to do everything.
Yeah, it's true.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, Kyle. I mean, I feel like we could talk for a really long time, but we do have to wrap up this interview. We really appreciate you coming on. I think we've got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, and anytime. If you have any other questions about anything, food, nutrition, skincare, biotech, space, just let me know.
Yeah,
For sure.
absolutely. Thanks again for coming on the Grab Everything podcast. It's been incredible. And of course, we'll have you back on.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right.
Enjoy the rest of your day. All right, Erum, why don't we kick it off? What did you think of that interview with Kyle of Delavie Sciences?
Oh my gosh, there's just so much that Kyle could do, but I really appreciate the focus. He's focusing on their current ingredients, how to really make sure that's helpful for their customers. Us being their customers too, I can't wait to get my hands on some products. I know that he's working more with some European brands, but I would love to just use some products and see what they're like. But for me, anytime I hear about a company being created out of NASA research, I'm always thinking, this is amazing. What else? Because I feel like there could just be a company that is a turnkey for all this innovation that comes out of NASA research and to commercialize it and just dedicated to that. We're commercializing NASA affiliated research. And it would be phenomenal because our whole lives today are because of space research in terms of communications. There's a lot. I'm sure you guys can ask ChatGPT what are all the innovations that came out of NASA or space research. But Kyle is a stunning example of being able to tap into what customers need to take research, create a company that can commercialize quickly. He's not saying, I'm using these microbes to create the next protein that's going to feed the world, which some people can do that. But he's like, no, this could actually help with skincare. We can spin this up. We don't need to make as much ingredient. It's just so thoughtful. But what about you? What did you think of this episode?
Like I said at the beginning, I was blown away when I met Kyle. I was blown away with just having the conversation. And I said at the beginning, he's a great example of convergence and being able to take ideas from disparate places. And again, this idea of using NASA's discoveries and looking at extremophiles in space and how they react, I think there's so much to uncover there. The moment we met him, I wanted to introduce him to our friends at Cultivarium who are also working on making extremophiles easier to work with. It sounds like Kyle and his team have done a lot of that and have probably a lot of proprietary tools. So I think they should get together and trade notes. But just the number of applications, and I'm glad he's working on skincare, because I think when we first started talking about applications of space, I just kept thinking about radiation and how do you protect astronauts from the radiation that they're exposed to. So really good interview, learned a lot from Kyle, and definitely want to get him on here again. You had written down food ingredients. I know you just mentioned freeze drying, but what was it about food ingredients and what Kyle talked about that sparked that interest?
Yeah, well, it's where Kyle started his research or had his research looking to create umami flavor for space food or like enabling the essence of umami while you're in space. Sounds like your senses are different in low Earth orbit or zero gravity. So how do you still create food that is enjoyable? Does it taste delicious? I love umami flavor. I mean, that's the flavor of mushrooms in part, seaweed, that savory flavor. I'm more on the savory side than the sweet side for my own personal enjoyment of food. But it was cool that that's where he started. And I think, as I said earlier, he could have been like, okay, well, I'm just going to create umami flavors. And then maybe he did the calculus and was like, okay, well, that's not really going to be a company I can commercialize today. Or maybe not. I mean, I don't want to spin his own story, but it sounded like Dathan Sinclair gave him the push towards this longevity skincare angle. And of course, Kyle's cool because he is also a lecturer. He has to talk about these things. So he's a perfect podcast guest. He's great at science communications. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot about the different types of UV light and how they're used or how they cause risk. We talked about UVC light being used for disinfectants. You have the light that goes over tables and is supposed to disinfect it. And then UVA light causes wrinkles. So you need to protect against those free radicals, that whole circle of UVA light causing wrinkles. And then there's another circle of UVB light causing cancer. So how do you protect against UVB light? So having researchers like Kyle really understand what is light and the different spectrums and what causes those negative effects, what causes positive effects, and then how to formulate to capture it all, how to protect against everything. It's super great to have scientists, researchers, entrepreneurs like Kyle come on and share not only stuff about their company and how it operates, but also the science and being able to talk about it, because that helps us, not just you and I, Karl, but us collectively, you, the listener, have new ways of talking about science yourself.
Yeah, I just want to highlight one thing. When Kyle talked about sunscreen and how sunscreens are regulated in the United States versus in Europe, I thought that was fascinating. And it made me go, next time I'm in Europe, which hopefully will be soon, I will be looking for sunscreen because I want to see what innovations are available there that we don't get in the United States. And that has to do with FDA processes. So I really appreciated that. And I kept thinking, look, if bacteria are protecting themselves with these weird coatings in space, then what can that do for us humans here on Earth? What can we learn from that? And what compounds can we take from those, which is what Delavie is doing, from those extremophiles or those microbes that are surviving in space? And how can we use them to protect ourselves and help with skin longevity, skin health? So great interview.
Yeah, like you're saying, the US sunscreens are FDA regulated, but in Europe, they're not regulated by the same organization that regulates pharmaceutical drugs. So it's considered a cosmetic and it allows for more innovation. The topic of regulation, whether it's a good thing or bad thing, that's not the conversation. Sometimes it's a little too much, a little overkill sometimes. And then I think that's where the conversation in the US over-regulating sunscreen isn't allowing for innovators to have the money to make these innovative sunscreens, because to go through that regulatory process requires a lot of money because it requires a lot of time too. And to have that runway to go through the regulatory process, it's just too challenging. So people just don't try here in the US. So Europe's friendly with that. And yeah, well, we're going to merry old England in a couple of weeks to the BioFab Fair, which I'm very excited about. So we can maybe pick up some sunscreens. I don't know if they started over-regulating it or still operate under the same European Union framework when it comes to sunscreens. But we'll keep our eyes peeled. I'm so excited. I can't believe it's just weeks away. Are you ready to go, Karl, to the BioFab Fair?
I wish I could say we were going tomorrow, and I wish I could say I was ready, but there's just so much going on between now and then. But for our listeners who do want to go to the BioFab Fair, we do have a discount code of GROW10, and hopefully we will see you there. But I am very excited about going to the BioFab Fair. I love going to BioFabricate, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how Suzanne Lee and her team, Amy Cognan, and all the team at BioFabricate are going to organize it this year in London. So again, there is a promo code. It's GROW10 for a discount, and hopefully we'll see you there.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for listening to the Grow Everything podcast. Please get in touch with us. I mean, we have people reach out, introduce us to other guests, ask us questions, give us compliments, which we love. Everyone likes to hear a compliment here or there. It's great to feel appreciated. You can comment on our post. We also have a hotline if you want to get back into making phone calls or text us. So thanks so much for listening. And we look forward to the next episodes where we're going to talk about some new ways that science is going to transform the way we live.
All right. That's the pod.